Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Bristol, Tennessee Regional Planning Commission meeting of January the 25th, 2021. Roll call.
Kelly Graham.
Here.
Malin Luttrell.
Here.
Mark Webb.
Here.
Margaret Firerobin.
Here.
Jason Boer. Ty Shue.
Here.
Joel Staten is here. Scott Gaynor.
Here.
Kevin Buck.
Here.
Present accounted for, sir.
Thank you, sir. Because of the situation, we have to do this electronically. We will now have the discussion of the necessity to do it electronically. Counselor, it is your floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, the governor has allowed meeting electronically during the course of the pandemic. One condition of meeting electronically is that if you are attending without video, that's by audio only, you are asked to identify yourself by name and position when you speak so that the public can understand who's speaking. At this point, Planning Commission should make a determination that it's necessary to meet electronically in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans. If there's any discussion that's necessary, you can have that discussion. Otherwise, you can just proceed to a roll call vote with a motion and a second. Thank you.
Is there a motion to proceed electronically?
I so move.
We have a motion and we do have a second. Roll call.
Who seconded it?
Who seconded it?
I
Margaret.
did. Somebody else did too.
Margaret, you got credit for it.
I always
Okay.
try to just FYI, if other people second stuff, it's easier for spelling. Okay. So have your secretary in mind.
Firerobin. Let's go.
Okay, Kelly Graham.
Yes.
Malin Luttrell.
Yes.
Mark Webb.
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Jason Boer is not here. Ty Shue.
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Scott Gaynor.
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is unscheduled comments from the public. There is no public in attendance, so we will go past that. We'll go to old business. We have no old business. Next item up is new business. Zoning ordinance amendment recommendation, special use permit.
Sir, how about the minutes?
Oh, we did. I'm sorry. I'm in. You have the minutes of December the 21st, 2020 in front of you. Any changes, additions, or corrections?
Mr. Chairman, they appear to be accurate, so I move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
Kevin Buck gets a second. B-U-C-K. And roll call.
Kelly Graham.
Yes.
Malin Luttrell.
Yes.
Mark Webb.
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Jason Boer is not here. Ty Shue.
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Scott Gaynor.
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. New business. Zoning ordinance amendment recommendation, special use permit. Tim?
It's up for consideration and further discussion is the special use permit language that I think over the past 2 or 3 planning commission meetings we have discussed. Staff, last time you had requested we look at some additional information and look at the requirements for the special use plan that was submitted. Sheriff, I'll let you give that presentation now, and we'll just walk you through the points and see if you're comfortable with what we have in your packet.
Good morning. Good morning. Good evening, everyone. Good Lord. So tonight we want to just touch on a couple different, well, really just a couple points with this special use permit recommendation. We've had, like Tim said, a couple of meetings where we've had really great discussion over the special use permit language. And so we're kind of down to hopefully the last details on this, and wanted to just touch back with you all this evening to make sure we're on the right track or adjust if we need to. But if you remember, there were really 2 points of discussion with the last draft that we looked at in December. And the majority of the conversation centered around this item number 2 that's on your screen. So it's in red. And that is a section that would state what the expectation is for a special use concept plan. What we would like to see on a plan to help the Planning Commission make a good recommendation or a good approval for special use site plan. So number 2 shows in red what we've developed over the course of the progression of this ordinance here. And what has changed since you all looked at it last month is the last line, which says that, well, it did say that the special use site plan shall be prepared by and contain the signed seal of the appropriate licensed professional registered in the state of Tennessee. And the staff intent or concern when we put that in there in December was just to make sure that you all get some sort of accurate drawing that would give you the information you needed to review the application. But the Planning Commission concern in December was that could be too much and a cost that they didn't want to put on to a potential developer applicant without knowing what kind of approval would happen. We tied it very closely to the site plan application requirements. So the thought was that when they went through this process, they would be rather well set up to move right into the site plan application. So those items are still there. So we'd still be asking people to think about those items when they prepared their concept plan for you all. But this would not require, as it's written for this revision, would not require a professional to come up with that drawing. And we have we have a slide. Oh, sorry.
Let me jump in real quick, Sheriff, if I can. The main thing, we looked at, and you'll see a slide coming up at the end that breaks those details out so it's more readable. So if there's a point on there, when we're looking at what to put on the site plan, that y'all might say, no, we're not comfortable having them to have to show that we could take that point out. But in general, we felt the compromise would be not to require the professional to do it, that they could, as long as there's a scale drawing and showed these basic points on the drawing, that would let you all see some specificity without having to pay that expense of a professional. And also, we felt very uncomfortable about putting language in a regulations basically saying you can come and ask us to give approval or give how we feel about something that's non-binding. And but when we actually look at something, we'll vote how we vote. So it felt strange to try to put that language in the ordinance. So what we did is the professional get rid of that cost and expense, but it does have some basic information we hope that everybody sees as relevant to a special use permit that would be helpful to see for you all to see when you're all deciding on special use permits. But anyway, go ahead, Sheriff. We can talk about the other language right now.
Yeah, I mean, that really is it. We were just going to show this number 2, and like Tim said, we've got a slide here in just a second that would show you kind of an easier to read bulleted list, so you all can pick and choose if you want to, if you feel like something's not appropriate to ask for on that site plan, we could remove it. We've got a easier list to look at. And then, like Tim said, just in thinking through some of the consequences of adding some language that would give someone sort of a pre-approval and some of the ramifications of that, just felt a little hesitant to add that into the ordinance. We started thinking about some of the things that could happen or might happen in terms of doing that. And, what if by the time the person was ready to submit for the special use permit application, the makeup of the planning commission changed, or if it went, years, we have to start thinking through expirations of those pre-approvals and just some of the layered, some of the problems that could incur in doing that. So the main points of conversation in December was to what level to require that concept plan. And then the planning commission talked some about the kind of informal meeting with the planning commission to discuss a special use approval. And with that, those are the changes that we have for you to look at and discuss. We've got the red line slides, which is what we're on right now. We've got a couple of clean copy slides. Here we go, a clean copy. And then we've got this list here that just gives kind of an easier to look at bulleted list of what's in that special use plan requirement paragraph or number 2 that's in your draft proposal. So these are the items that would be expected when we ask somebody to submit a concept plan. And so this would be the information that you all would get to review. So you have just the general information, property boundary with courses and distances, property area information, stuff like zoning, setbacks, flood designation, information on the existing and proposed buildings, square footage of proposed buildings, number of stories, number of dwellings, and so on. So this is that list minus the requirement that it be prepared by a professional.
And the reason we wanted to just bullet it out, make it easier for y'all to read, is if you had anything that you saw on what would we feel is minimal information on a special use plan. And if you had something there that you, once again, it doesn't have to be by a professional, but we would prefer it to be to scale, at some scale. If you get more than 50 scale, it gets awful small depending on the development, size of the development. But the bigger ones will probably have a professional looking at it anyway, the bigger developments. But is there anything on there that y'all see that?
In order for me to grasp this, I'm referring back to a few months or years ago when somebody would bring a concept plan to us. It was pretty much, drawn to scale and everything. We would look at it, we would make comments. There would not be a formal motion to accept it or anything. The developer would just sit back and listen to the comments that we had, and he would go from there. Now, is that the same protocol that we would do here? We wouldn't be voting on anything with this under this concept plan idea, would we?
Well, I haven't, since I've been here, we haven't done it that way. I know that. I mean, y'all may have done that before, but they could bring something through public comment to you. But
yeah, what we had done before.
Saying, when I do apply, this is what I need to provide.
Yeah.
Now, if they wanted to do something prior to that, they could always do that at the public comment portion. But the staff preparing something formally to submit to you all that is not a vote for like a special use permit, we are very hesitant to do that, other than let them do that under public comment, because a non-binding opinion is just that. I mean, it's not the formal opinion of the planning commission. And that's what I said, anybody can bring and ask you questions. If I were on the board, I'd be hesitant to respond personally, because I mean, it does have some.
Well, it was just a time when somebody could submit a concept to us and get our ideas, hey, this will work, or will this not work? Is it, do we need it here, or would it be better to restructure it? Kelly, you remember any of those requests we had like that?
Absolutely. And what I'm afraid is that what we've got here is going to miss the point of just exactly what you're talking about, of having a developer, and I use that term loosely, somebody that owns a piece of land and wants to know if they can put some apartments on it, wants to know if they can do self-storage, and how would we feel about that particular type of use on this particular piece of property?
Yeah, exactly.
Not necessarily wanting to get into where the trash dump's going to be on it. Just, hey, if I bring this to you and I've got it set up right and so forth, is this something that you all would consider, or I need to know right now? No, don't even think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because even still, what we've got right here, even though it's not being done by somebody with a stamp, there's still going to be money involved, and we don't want to take away from them the ability to come to us and say, hey, I've got an idea for this piece of land. What do you guys think about it?
Yeah.
But my question to you all would be, that is nowhere written in any of our regs that to formally staff. I mean, people could do that anytime through public comment, and very happy to encourage that to them. But for staff to prepare a report or an item for you all to look at, if it's non-binding, it worries me that you're setting yourself up as a board to have some conflict should something come and you change your mind for whatever reason be, or your different board members are on here, or how long do they have to submit the formal application? You know, things could change versus when they think they might have a blessing from the board, but ultimately it's non-binding, and they may understand that. But once again, and that's up to you all. I'm just some sage advice, as I would be hesitant if I was on the board to give any advice other than thank you. You know, staff can look this over and comment back to you on if they feel it's appropriate or not.
When we talk about a concept plan, to me, that's, do you like this concept or do you not like this concept? You know, maybe we ought to take that word out of there.
Because I think what you're getting at is not a concept plan per se, because this is their definition of it, but an idea plan. This is an idea I've got for my piece of property. If I bring this idea to you in the proper form, what kind of response do you think I might get?
Well, you're not going to get any response from me, because exactly what Tim said. I mean, we can't sit there as a board and say, yep, it's great. I mean, that's like a vote, right? I mean, you have to sit there and go, you know, bring me the final product and then we'll talk. I mean, if they want to come as an informal or talk to you or talk to Tim in the city and say, you know, what do you think? I mean, there's nothing to stop them from doing that right now. But to me, this is applying for a special use permit. And if you're going to apply for a special use permit, you have to have this information. I mean, the devil's in the details on these things. So I'm at a loss to say that, yeah, we'll take something that's just a sketch or a discussion, because, you know.
Well, I guess I am getting confused as to what the concept plan that we labeled a concept plan months ago, you know, as to what we're, you know, seeking for a special use permit or something.
Well, I know the special use we've called them concept plans. We did change the term for a special use plan, but it was some level of specificity to the drawing. I mean, we were just trying to keep it from, if there were, ultimately the goal that we heard the board was how we had the word substantial changes. If there was substantial changes to what they submitted and the board saw and approved the special use permit, what point did we bring it back to you all for approval? Because it changed enough that staff felt like it was enough substantially different than what you all saw originally when you made the special use permit approval. And the word substantial, and you know, it is very vague as what that could be. So what we did is come back and try to not be onerous on what they show on a plan, but hey, you know, if you're physically applying for a special use permit, here are some things that we feel are pertinent to see on a plan that you all vote on. And that's when you apply for a special use permit. That has nothing to do with if you want to come and bounce an idea off the board or something during public comment. They can do that anytime. Once again, I would always ask the board to be hesitant to give any indication as to a blessing or not during that time, because I think it just possibly sets the board up for conflict down the road. Not that it would, but once again, I think there's two different things on here. Can I come to the board anytime and ask them, I've got an idea, what do you think? Yes, you can on anything that has to do with it. But this section is specifically when I apply for a special use permit, here is what I need and here is the process. So that's the difference I see in that.
I'm getting the word concept confused now as to when it was used months ago, so.
We called them concepts. We tried to, there's in the zoning regulation, that term was not used when we went back and did a search. So we tried to use the verbiage that was in the definitions in the zoning ordinance. So basically the special use plan is your concept plan.
Okay.
Kevin, I can see you want to say something. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with hearing from a potential developer about any idea that they have before the board, even as an agenda item. If there is no application in place, then I don't see how anything we say in the discussion can be held as any kind of promise. And so I think it could, as an agenda item to, discuss a potential project with a developer, I think that is legit. And I don't have any problem with that. Or telling him what I think about it.
I guess the question I would have, Kevin, is what would you want to see? Anything? A drawing?
I would have, no, if we were direct what we want to see, that puts an implication against the board. If it's just coming before us with whatever he has and there's no application in place, then there's no then the board has no obligation to anything.
What would you want to see from staff other than just
the item? This person wants to discuss a project with us.
Okay.
We don't necessarily see anything in black and white.
What it does, it sets us up. It helps us work with the community that's wanting to develop or wanting to do a project, and we can have some feedback back and forth about what we're going to be looking for, why we would think it's a good idea, why here's some things you need to watch out for, or absolutely heck no, there's no way in the world we're going to approve that because it's right next to. It's one of those things. Just come talk to us about it. We can give them some input of what we're going to be looking for when they make their actual application.
I agree.
Isn't that what staff does already?
There's a difference between staff doing it and the board doing it, because the staff has no power, theoretically.
No, I know, but I mean, those questions, what's the zoning? What's this? I mean, what kind of drainage do I need to have? What's the setbacks? I mean, those are the things that,
So here's where I think staff is trying to give us wisdom. So if we think about some of our special use permit requests in the past, and we might think something's a great idea, and then when it's put out for public, we might learn things that we didn't think about. So we might have been very enthusiastic about something, and then during the public input part, we learned some things that we hadn't considered. So just being, and when we have if it comes in for, and I can see the benefit of it too, but when it comes informally, that provides no opportunity for neighbors to comment or that's before anybody in the public knows anything that's going on. So we could end up kind of being in a corner and having to make harder decisions. So just throwing that out for.
To follow up on that really quickly, if I may too, with the special use permit, another thing to keep in mind is once the application is made and heard by the Planning Commission, that does require, I mean, that is at that point, you're at the level of a public hearing that's advertised, the signs go up on the property, so on and so forth. So that, I think that was a little bit of the concern too, in actually putting the informal process in play in the ordinance, is that public component is required at the application level. And what position could that put you in terms of, somebody coming and saying, well, gosh, I brought this to you informally as you asked me to, and you didn't really seem to have a problem with it until the room was full of neighbors that hated the idea. So there's the subdivision regs do carry a concept plan idea for subdivision plats, but that approval rests solely with the Planning Commission. It doesn't require the public hearing, but one kind of quirk to this special use permit application is the public component of it, as Margaret was kind of just talking about.
Let's think back to when Mitch Cox came in front of us and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing some apartments and some mini storage out here on West State Street. If he had come to us the month before and said, I'm thinking about doing this, it's going to be so many units and da-da-da, and said, are you going to look favorably towards that? What do you think about that particular property being used for that kind of use? I think we would have discussed it with them. We wouldn't have had a problem with it. Then the next month, he could have brought in the plans we're talking about. Because if you think about, even if it doesn't have the stamp on it, what is being requested here by staff, that's a lot of money to spend. And if we had said on the front end, Lord, no, don't even think about doing something like that, it'll never pass. Or if we had said, well, it will depend once we have hearing, some objections may come up and so forth. But that being said, I mean, it's not a no on the front end, go ahead and go for it. Because the point that I've been making on this is you're asking somebody to spend a lot of money just to come in front of us to find out whether or not that is an idea that we would approve for that particular area.
So I think about the assisted living in Halston View area, which personally I think was a great idea for lots of different reasons. So if that had come to us beforehand, and then when it did, anyway, so that's a different one than the example that you're giving, Kelly. So I can see it from both sides. I think we want to be developer friendly and make our processes as developer friendly as possible. But I think it's critical that we remember that we represent all the citizens of Bristol, not just a certain community or certain business or whatever. So I can see that it could be an issue.
I mean, would we be able to ask that person before you come to the commission to just even talk about your idea? Have you considered all these aspects? And let them say yes or no before they even come. If they've not considered them, then yeah, they could come, but they're probably going to leave quickly as well, because we're going to ask them the same thing. Have you considered these items?
Well, I mean, I guess the question I got for everybody is, we can take this whole section out and operate like we had in the past. We were just trying to get some some more detail for you all when somebody physically does apply for a special use permit. It has nothing to do with on anything special use. Subdivision, they can come and talk with y'all anytime they want, and but it's the same as a subdivision plat. I mean, we don't have language in the subdivision regs that say, you know, you need to come, you know, you can come and get the how the planning commission feels about it. I mean, that's just a given. You're always welcome to do that as a public on any item that you all review. But our problem, or not problem, but what staff concerned us was writing that into an ordinance of, hey, y'all can come and feel the temperature of the room. It's not binding. I mean, that just to me does, and staff didn't make good regulation of saying, hey, you can come anytime and it's a non-binding. They can tell you anything you want, but it doesn't mean anything till you actually apply for it. I mean, take what they give you as for what it is. You know, what if y'all said no and they wanted to come anyway before it, and then all of a sudden you see the plans and you're like, yes. I mean, there's the opposite example. I mean, until they formally, then this section is when they formally submit, this would be to us the minimum things we would like to see on a plan as staff, at least. I mean, this is not a lot of stuff here. I mean, if you can't produce the boundaries, the setbacks, I mean, we can tell you this. I mean, it's not in a scale drawing. Do you all really want to be voting on a special use permit with this not having this information in front of you all? I mean, that's, and then we can, if you can, like I said, to me, it's twofold. One, coming before you and getting the wind, feeling how y'all feel about something that's non-binding aside. If you do apply, do you have problems with this information being in the application packet?
Tim, I think we're talking about two different things.
We are.
I agree.
I understand have all this information for a special use permit application. I agree with that. But what I don't want is I don't want somebody to get turned away at the front door because they don't have all this information. I want them to have the ability to come talk to us and talk the project out a little bit.
And they have that now. So I don't, I don't understand y'all trying to formalize that in all your decisions that you make. I mean, do you want some?
No, I think that needs to be formalized. That is out there, and we would be the only thing that I heard that was concerning was that it was it could happen during the public open forum, but I don't see any reason it couldn't be an agenda item as well.
So a couple of things. I guess a question would be, maybe we need an overall statement that applies to everything, that the Planning Commission represents our community of citizens and developers, et cetera, and remind people that during public comments, they are welcome to come and express whatever or share ideas, or maybe something like that would be something to think about. The other is just looking at, I know we want to try to do best practices as much as possible. So a question is, are there other places, maybe beyond our Tri-Cities, to consider as well, that have this kind of approach or attitudes or whatever, or would we be totally out of the mainstream for doing something, taking a stance like this? So it would be good to know if there's anybody else doing anything like this and how do they do it? And the other thing, just for the formal application, I would not have a problem requiring a professional to prepare that. So with all this stuff that's required, I think, again, we're talking about two different things. So
personally, I like the idea that anybody, not necessarily a developer, but maybe a retired person like me who's got some property and I want to know how to use it, can I come to the planning commission and say, hey, I've been thinking about doing this, this, or that. What do you all think? You know, can I do this, this, or that? Would that be appealing to the community? Would that work in this particular neighborhood? You know, unfortunately, we've had, this is an example that we've got some churches that are closing, and I know this is going to be discussed later. You know, somebody who bought that church or is thinking about buying that church, I would like to turn that into a 4 apartments. Is that possible? You know? And it's a start for somebody who wants to develop without investing a heck of a lot of money. Of course, I know that person could come into staff and ask those kind of questions, but he might want to know what the general feeling of the planning commission is towards something like that. And I would certainly want to provide that opportunity.
And they can do that now. I don't disagree with that. But my question to all you,
really good. They have done it in the past.
Is how comfortable would you be commenting on just somebody's idea to make them feel one way or the other, whether it's yes, or not?
It's how you let them leave. I like your idea. Bring us more information. It might work, but it might not. But I like your idea. Let's see if it'll work. Can we work it out?
So our attorney is on. Danielle, do you want to give us advice? Do you have ideas?
I do think you guys are, I think as you said, there are 2 different issues here. One's the application for a special use permit, and one is the ability for people to come. And I will say that Planning Commission is unique among the boards that I attend in that you do have a period set aside on your agenda for public comment. And there's, you know, you announce, Chairman, at the beginning of it, that this is the time for anybody to speak to Planning Commission about a matter that's not on the agenda. I think that there could be some room for putting language into, whether it's the zoning ordinance or into your sort of general rules. This is an example of what you could talk about if you're coming to a public comment. You could come and talk to us about a project and understand that we're not giving you an approval. We're not.
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing happening at this. There will be no vote. You're not on the agenda. You just have the opportunity to explore a project, I guess. So I think it could be done. I think the other thing to weigh against that is staff is not going to have had the advantage of being able to look at the regulations and look at the project and give you the benefit of that research. So you won't be able to look at staff and say, hey, is this allowed? Because you can't expect staff to make that call on the fly in a situation like that. Staff's response is going to have to be, we don't know at this point, we're going to have to research it. So while it's a very user-friendly and community-friendly thing to do, it may end up not really saving this person much time in the long run, I think. So those are my thoughts, which are not really legal thoughts so much as just process thoughts, I guess.
You know, it's not the Burwells and the Mitch Cox's world that we're trying to protect with the discussion that we're having. It is the retired guy that has an extra piece of property and wants to see if he can put 4 units on it. Mm-hmm. And so before he goes to the process of getting an engineer or an architect or so forth to come in and look at how he's going to do it, blah, 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 just wants the opportunity to come in and talk to us because it's going to need a special use permit to see how we would feel about it. And then he would kind of get a better idea which way to go. It's making sure that somebody does not spend a bunch of money on something that's absolutely dead in the water is what I'm looking at.
Well, it seems to me that's a question. I mean, again, if you want to put 4 units in a residential, single family residential, that's a no. And so, ask staff and they can tell you that. I mean, that there are certain things that are pretty clear, yes or no. I mean, we're talking about special use, which is borderline, But again, in order to say, you know, yeah, that use can be in this area, you need the details, you know? So I still struggle with what you're trying to accomplish that's already there. I mean, it just seems weird that you want to formalize an informal process. I mean, that's what you're asking, is you're saying you want somebody to come and do something informally, but you want to have a formal process for it. And I'm confused at what that's going to accomplish.
Tim, what has been the frequency of these type of requests?
Well, the majority of them, as you all are aware, are for the multifamily and B3 that we've seen over the past year and a half.
Yeah.
And city council, at your work session tomorrow, you all will hear, you know, you two know, especially you approved to move forward with those changes to the B3 regs, or recommended an approval to city council to remove that special use permit requirement out of there. The other one that we see a lot on is the mini warehouses. I mean, those are the two. Expansions of churches and residential, you'll see every now and then, you know, not a lot, frequently. You know, nowadays it seems it's the opposite. Like Mr. Webb said, they're closing more than they're expanding, it seems like now. I was just trying to think, you had the sports clubs, a couple of sports clubs in residential zones that y'all considered. But I mean, the frequency, the most frequent ones have been the mini warehouses, mini storage, and residential in a B3, multifamily in a B3. I think it's by far the most you've heard recently.
I mean, maybe what Danielle was saying is that, you know, that should be enough guidance if someone comes in and has an idea that, you know, if they haven't talked to planning or to the staff, you know, we can direct them to go having more in-depth conversations. But just a general feel of something, I mean, I think we should be able to maybe give them a general idea, but nothing binding.
Under the assumption that city council goes ahead with that multifamily, taking the special use requirement away, are there any other multifamilies that are going to require a special use permit, or will that eliminate it?
I think there might be in an industrial zone or something, Sheriff, off the top of my head. But I think for the business zones, that would take care of it, the multifamily.
So the special use permits will probably in the future be things like churches or the sports clubs or the mini warehouses.
In general, the most of them, and we're going to look at the mini warehouse use and see if there's not some by right zones that could be put in, you know, as we examine some of the uses in other sections. But certainly the ones that are more prevalent to have conversation would be the uses allowed in the residential districts by special use, which would be your churches, philanthropic institutions, daycares. Is that in there, Sheriff?
Yeah, it is.
So, you know, that list that we don't have any rezonings or anything tonight to pull up a list, but those lists, you know, those special use, and they stay similar for each one in those residential. You've got the sports clubs. Those are probably your most prevalent, what it would be after should council approve the multifamily in a B3 zone, other than many warehouses. And hopefully we can put together some information on that and maybe get those not by special use in certain zones also. So our whole goal, you know, the staff, they do a great job of talking with people and giving them their thoughts, and, you know, what planning commission has done on similar type projects and how they have voted. Not that we can tell them how you're going to vote. We don't know. And, you know, and certainly I don't ever discourage anybody from talking to planning commission. Like I said, the biggest gray hairs, all these gray hairs up here that makes me a little concerned is I'm sort of like Scott. I would be very hesitant sitting on a board to give an indication one way or the other. And I would say you really need to speak with staff and get their opinions and check everything out. Because you won't have much information in front of you other than an idea, and not discouraging people from seeking those to you all. But like I said, I mean, not that it's technically and legally, it might be okay, this was non-binding anyway, but it really worries me if you do something different or require something different than your non-binding discussions when it comes to you formally. That, well, once again, well, you said this when we met informally, now you're saying this. And I mean, I understand it's non-binding, but it is a potential to set up, a conflict point. Well, now I've spent all this money and you're not going to approve it. Y'all didn't approve it, even though you said, and it might be close when y'all, it might be 5-4 when you give a non-binding opinion. When you see people shake their heads or not. I mean, you just, like I said, not that I would ever discourage anybody from talking to you all, but my sage gray hairs is going, you might want to be careful with what you say back to those individuals based on very minimal information. Because you saw the rezoning, like, say the guy in the rezoning hadn't told you, he said, not that it would have changed your minds, but okay, they're going to be, I don't have any information on how tall they're going to be. I've got to do my site design to look at it or something. And then all of a sudden you come back with 3 stories or 4 stories versus, you might have envisioned 1 or 2 stories that he had a thought on, that all of a sudden something's changed that changes your mind. I mean, I don't know, to me, it just makes for, while it's good and understand and they can do that, I just, once again, would always caution people, when you say something and you say, yeah, it sounds like it might work, they hear something different than that. And even though it's non-binding, that to me has a potential to lead to conflict. And board membership might change between when they submit something formally. You just don't know.
All right, Kai and Joel, neither one of y'all have weighed in on this. If y'all would, please.
I like the opportunity to come to the planning commission without a legal, binding vote. I think it would be good if we could hear from the developers.
And I like Danielle's idea of putting language in there with regards to having a conversation. However, I'm not a fan personally of basically us calling audibles at these meetings. I just think, if you're going to end up calling an audible, someone may get the wrong idea of why we're calling the audible. So, I mean, that's my take on it. I kind of favor Scott and Tim's perspective on this particular issue.
If I've got an idea for something to come into this city, where else can I go?
Well, that's what staff's here for. That's the first avenue you should approach, and I'd always encourage anybody to talk with staff on the idea, because our goal here is you have a vision, and we want to try to get you to that vision within the regulations we have on the books.
Okay, what happens if I have an idea for something that you might not necessarily go along with? Can I present it to the whole planning commission?
Well, it's like
we're talking about an idea.
You can anytime you want. So you can talk to planning commission, city council anytime you want. That does not mean they have to respond to you at that point, because it is an idea. But they can talk to, city council has the public comment section, and y'all have a public comment section. And if I just get a little, we can put stuff on the agenda if they have an idea, but from a staff's perspective, what you get on an idea is not going to be very much information from staff other than here's the zoning of the property. And
Okay, if this person brought an idea to public comment and asked us what we thought about it, and we said, well, I like the idea, or I don't like the idea, what's the difference? I mean, if it was on the agenda, if it wasn't on the agenda, I mean,
But I would,
the same thing.
I would first ask them, had they reviewed it with staff though? I wouldn't give them an answer one way or another unless they come back and say yes or no. That's how I base my comment.
Tim, let me ask this. If somebody was to come to staff, would you bring it to the planning commission and inform them that this was brought up?
well, if they wanted to proceed with something that you all, if they wanted us to, yes, we would. I mean, I don't think it's pertinent for everybody that we talk about to bring everything to planning commission, because all of a sudden the ideas people have on property, they might be premature for the public to hear about. That,
Okay.
because there are some, so I think I would have to leave that up to them. I'd more than like, you could talk to, here's what staff feels on this. If you want to talk to planning commission, you're more than happy to talk, come and comment to them. Can't say they will comment any way, shape, or form back to you about it, but
Okay.
certainly we could do that. But I would be hesitant just to bring everything that gets discussed in this building to the public, because of, there are projects out there that people don't want
Need to be public yet.
until they become a real project.
Okay.
I think the next discussion item kind of shows how this can happen, or how it does happen. Is you've got an issue where some of these buildings that exist in some of these residential districts are underutilized. So we've got a couple of people or a couple of situations over the past year or so where somebody has brought a project to us that we've said, well, that does not fit the zoning right now. We've got a new owner of one of these buildings that's wanting to pursue some projects that don't fit the zoning. So, and then through a study of our own, we've kind of collected some information about what happens with these buildings. So it's kind of a culmination of things to make us bring it to you to say, what's your feeling on this, and how would you advise staff to make changes if you think there's reason to change. So that's kind of one of the ways that this can proactively work out too. If it's not just an individual coming to you specifically, it can happen through this kind of research as well.
Tim,
Where are we on this?
I've got two people said something at once. Malin?
Just if a person would come to a planning commission meeting and had not talked to staff, for people in that category, or for public comments in general, could we not use the similar clause like we do at city council meeting about, you may not get an answer, or we're not giving an answer because we're uninformed or don't have all the details, that someone will get back to you?
Well, I mean, I think you could do that at the piece. I don't think that's written anywhere in any of our codes, though, Daniel.
No, I'm just saying, could we do that though? I mean, like,
board, right. It's more of a board policy.
It could be included in something, in a board policy, or when you open the meeting and you open that public comment period. Certainly that's doable, and that's your wiggle room, or your CYA language that you'd want to have before you hear anything like that.
And like I said, it's not our intent to ever discourage somebody from speaking with you all. We're just trying to give some data and opinions, or what we see from the bureaucratic side of it. As far as we don't want have you all backed into a box some way unnecessarily that we feel could potentially do it. I mean, I'd be more upset if I come to you with an idea and you said, yeah, it looks good, and then no, we didn't approve it, than if I didn't come to you with an idea and had to produce a drawing. I mean, personally, because I would have felt at that point that I had the blessing to spend money from you all on something that was going to get approved. I mean, that's my biggest fear of it all. I mean, it is that. I mean, and that's just me. You know how people can misinterpret things that boards say and take them to be the gospel when they may not be the gospel. You know, nobody's officially voted on this. But
At least,
not trying to discourage anybody from talking to you all, just
if we could adopt and use that clause that I referenced, at least there'd be an expectation that individual would be able to reveal what they're trying to accomplish. And the expectation is, we can't give you an answer, but, we'll have someone get back with you and look into it a little deeper.
Okay, so where are we on this now?
Well, the question I would have for the board would be, number one, if and when you apply for a special use permit, are you comfortable with how we have written the language at this point? It has nothing to do with coming with an idea. It's just when you apply for a special use permit, this section, are you comfortable with that language? And if you are, we would like a recommendation and a second so we can pass it on to city council if appropriate. And that would get two things done. One, it would clean up some of the unknowns in that special use and put the time limit started running where people would have a couple of years to work on that. And then number two issue is then after that, we can look and talk with Danielle about some language that covers more than just special use permit decisions that you all make. I mean, there's other things besides special use that people can come and discuss with you all as far as development concerns. So if we're going to make a statement like that, to me, it would be best to be all inclusive of the things you all regulate versus the specificity of when I actually do apply for a subdivision plat, or when I actually do apply for a special use, or when I actually do apply for a whatever it may be, here are the steps I need to follow when I actually do make that application. So number one, Mr. Chairman, I'd just ask if everybody's comfortable moving forward with, when I do apply, this is the process we would like to see used.
Let me informally ask people, are they comfortable with this, or do they want staff to come back with something amended?
I have one correction on these special use plan requirements, bullet number 2, property boundary with, that should be bearings / distances instead of courses. And other than that, I would, with that correction, I would vote to approve the whole thing. And to that end, I will so move.
Second.
You're muted, Kim.
Kelly, muted.
Sorry. We have a motion and a second to approve what we've got with one change. Is there any discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Hearing none. Joel, if you call the roll.
Yes, sir. Kelly Graham.
Reluctant, yes.
Balin Luttrell.
Yes.
Mark Webb.
Without the word comprehensive, yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Jason Boer's not here. Takashu.
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Scott.
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And what we'll do, Mr. Chairman, is we'll look at some language to add in the appropriate place with Danielle on what y'all, the other item we discussed about coming to Planning Commission with ideas, non-binding ideas, or where y'all make non-binding decisions with them.
All right. So I guess we're up to the next item, which is adaptive reuse of commercial buildings.
Well, first, Mr. Chairman, let me run through some city council updates here on your agenda. At the January 5th meeting, City Council had a public hearing and passed on second reading the RE District text amendment that was effective Friday the 22nd, so this past Friday. So those new regulations are in place now. We will get revised zoning ordinances out to everybody, so they have the updated one with these changes. The rezoning at 839 Hill Street from RE to B1A also passed. Now, it did not require a public hearing. I can't remember if it did or didn't, but I don't think it did. And it was effective the January 22nd also. And that was everything from the January 5th City Council meeting. And council at their work session tomorrow will hear the changes to the B3 to allow flexibility in residential developments. And if they're comfortable with that, they will have that on their February 2nd meeting for first reading. And then they'll also discuss the rezoning of Bluntful Highway, the property on Bluntful Highway that y'all discussed in December, and that'll be on their work session. And then first reading in February 2nd. So that's the council update.
Okay. So now we'll go to the discussion on adaptive reuse. My bad. Thank you.
And up for discussion is adaptive reuse of buildings in residential zones, some older buildings, and the one that everybody's most familiar with when we look at these is Rosemont, the former Rosemont Elementary School, and how to utilize those structures. The current zoning ordinance is very limited on what can be used in those residential zones. The use is allowed, but those buildings, short of tearing them down, we want to gauge the comfort level of Planning Commission on a few items on what possibly you might entertain to those buildings to be used for. And then with that, I'll let Sheriff give the presentation here.
Thank you, Tim. So this has kind of come up for a couple of reasons, and it was something that was identified in the housing study that we worked on earlier. Well, I guess it was last year at this point, but it's a goal to look at adaptive reuse of some of the vacant buildings that we have in residential areas in that study. And also just we have been approached in the past by people wanting to do different projects in these buildings. And currently, most of them are going to be located in either the RE zone. So those are the historic areas of Fairmount and around Windsor Avenue, and then some in the R2 zones. So we have a couple of those in the R2 zones. And what's currently allowed is either single family or duplex developments. And then you have the special use permit list, which I think we have on a slide here, just a couple slides forward. But those are the items such as churches, daycares, philanthropic institutions and clubs, some of those special use permit items. So here are just a sample of a couple buildings around town. So you of course have the Rosemont School, who does have a new owner who would like to repurpose that building. So that's on the left side of the screen. At the top, you have a kind of commercial garage building that I think has been everything from a gun shop to a cabinet shop in the past, but it's on East Cedar Street and is currently zoned RE. So there's very limited commercial use that can happen in this building. And then you have a couple buildings like the one on the bottom right. And this is actually on Anderson Street, but you have a couple of them in the Windsor Avenue area. And then you have at least one of those over in Fairmount. So they're there are a few examples of these around town, but obviously things that were built to serve the neighborhood at a time when everybody in the neighborhood wasn't driving around, driving down to Food City to pick stuff up. It was more local neighborhood business that would be housed in these buildings. So I think, Tim, on the next slide, here we have just a sample of what the R2 district allows. So this is what would be in play, for example, the Rosemont School. That's zoned R2, so obviously it's a large building. They could do a 2-family residential structure there, or single family, use the building as a single family residence. They could come to you all and ask for a special use permit for the items that are listed A through F. If you remember, probably about 2.5 years ago, we had somebody that came in and asked for a special use permit for a sports club. They were going to do a basketball school there. So that's one that we had. A couple people have talked about different things that they would open in conjunction with a daycare center. People have definitely approached us about multifamily in that building, but that R2 district just does not allow anything over the duplex use. So what we wanted to do is we've just taken a light scan. We haven't done a whole lot of research on this, but just taking a light look around at what some other communities, we looked at Knoxville and Johnson City, to see what people have done to encourage either utilization of old buildings and or to allow a commercial use in a residential district in the case of Knoxville. So here you can see Knoxville has a neighborhood non-residential reuse. So they look at structures that can be reused for any of these items on the screen. So art galleries, art and fitness studios, offices, personal service establishments, eating and drinking establishments, retail goods, and a social service center. So that's what Knoxville allows in some of their neighborhood districts. And then in Johnson City, so a little bit closer to home, they allow some reutilization of discontinued schools or similar public buildings to be reused as libraries, museums, art galleries, or cultural facilities, offices, offices for nonprofit or civic organizations, and then social service organizations. They do have some restrictions on them in terms of delivery hours, parking, and then they don't allow exterior alterations beyond those necessary to maintain the structure. But they do have some regulations in place to encourage reuse of some of these buildings. So I showed you a couple of examples Dr. Webb brought up. There are several churches, there's a couple churches around, some of them rather large in these older areas of town that unfortunately are no longer, no longer viable or used as church facilities. So there are some, the big vacant buildings sitting around that probably are not going to be utilized unless it's by a real creative person for their home or for a duplex. So the question tonight to you all is not to have, not to come out of this with any answers, but just have a little short discussion on, is this something we should pursue, and get your input and temperature on what you might be willing to consider if we walk down this path a little bit.
And one question for everybody would be, just thinking about this, and a simple one to me to discuss, not trying to get an answer like Shara said, would be, how do you feel about in these zones letting the structures go back to some sort of multifamily use at some density, lesser density than our typical multifamily, be it based on how many units per acre you could have in that residential zone or less. I mean, currently, let's talk Rosemont School, and I forgot how many acres that is off the top of my head, 3-4 acres or something like that. I don't remember exactly how many, but R2 zone allows 9 units per acre, and that's an awful lot of units per acre, but it is R2 zone, and if they subdivided, they could have that density in that property. Would you entertain some sort of multifamily use above the R2? Just, you can only have a duplex per lot type standard? Because if that's the standard, then obviously you could never use them. Nobody's going to put 2 units in Rosemont. That would be, they might. I mean, it'd be pretty neat. It'd be some big units though, but you'd have your own gym for 2 units, but it would be awful big. But would y'all entertain something more use multifamily wise in those zones? Not knowing right now what I would suggest or even recommend at a density, but just in general, would you entertain something to allow some multi-use in those structures?
Tim, in my thought process, just thinking about that school right now, does the other vacant property go with that school?
It's all one tract of land currently.
Okay.
And we're talking pretty much strictly using the existing building, correct?
Correct.
Would there be anything to keep you from adding a new building if you were to change the density?
You could if you all wanted to. If you didn't want them to add, you could strictly prohibit it to the existing structure. I think the intent for us, if staff would be at some density, is it feasible to allow, and then different for, like, if it's an R1A zone, make it a lesser density than if it was an R2 zone. Cause basically, and then require lots, you can't, I would put some lot size restrictions on it, like, per unit lot, a minimum of X square foot per lot, per unit. I mean, it's just food for thought. I mean, they don't have to answer tonight, but, is that something people feel good about with those reuses of those buildings?
Y'all may shoot me, but I would like to hear somebody who might have some ideas for how those buildings could be used.
We try to find somebody that has done some adaptive reuses and let them come talk to you all.
I mean, are we in any hurry to know? Or I would like to know what could be, those buildings could be used for, from somebody who could maybe develop them.
Hey, Tim, I have a question. Are you familiar with the Langston Hughes Center in Johnson City?
If I drove by it, probably, but not by name.
I think that was a very similar situation to, I guess, what we're talking about, but I can't remember if they completely demoed the school and then rebuilt it. So that's why, the only reason that came to my memory, because of the Johnson City slide that I'm looking at right now. I'm trying to figure out if that shares a similar narrative to what we're looking at.
I think the one, and I don't know what it's zoned in Kingsport, that sticks out in my mind is where they had their art center there off of, what's the road everybody peels off and goes to Church Circle and gets off
Center Street. It's off of Center Street. The Renaissance Center.
Yes, the Renaissance Center. That was but that was more government. I think the city didn't. That's the city does that, which is allowed by us currently. But thinking of arts or multifamily, I mean, I'm just anything y'all can think of that you might be comfortable with in some of these zones. I don't think I would go as far to say that I think Knoxville had it. Let me see, I'm on the wrong screen, but I don't think I'd have eating and drinking establishments that might not be the best use in those buildings. Maybe unless you limited the size of the cafe, like a cafe or something. I don't know. I mean, it
depends. I mean, there could be, I'm sure other people have been other places where there's like a church in a semi-residential area that is made into an eating and establishment that's pretty cool. So I could think of a couple in our area that would work for that on a main thoroughfare, not necessarily Rosemont, but others.
And they're unique, and I think anything we do here, I would recommend that we do it under special use permit. As much as we talked about special use, I think that would be anything we allow as a use for those or adaptive reuse, that we put it under special use, so you can make sure the planning commission that they do things that make it compatible or keep it compatible with the neighborhood.
Didn't Bristol, Virginia convert a former elementary school into apartments?
Douglas, but I mean, that's right there at their multifamily. You know, it's right there at the.
And Jefferson.
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson
Jefferson, yeah.
on West Mary.
Yeah, they did that.
Very nice setups for both of those. Good setups.
And Jefferson would be more in a residential area than Douglas. Well, I mean,
Wasn't on the Virginia side, wasn't one of the old hospitals turned into a dormitory too?
well, on North Street, they Bristol, Virginia side, the old healthcare NHC or whatever. The door. You're talking the original hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is it's a Margaret, you can help me.
It's People Incorporated has a recovery center there, so it's apartments, and I think they don't turn over much. It's for men, and I don't know if there's 12 apartments or 20 or something, but I think it's worked great.
And that used to be like the nursing's quarters one time.
Yes, it was. That's what I was getting ready to say. It used to be the nursing quarters.
I think the main concern about Rosemont's probably one of your more prime, because it's sitting right in the middle of a residential area. I mean, it's single family residential area, even though it's zoned R2. There's things that come to my mind. I don't know that I would have you all think about traffic. If you put some uses in there, the traffic it may generate through that area that's currently not experiencing noise. Noise is a huge issue for things when you start looking at adaptive reuses, lighting, just the things y'all always look at. That read the special use permit to make them compatible. How things we need to think about when you're looking at special uses. But
that property on East Cedar Street,
will
that be affected at all by the expansion through there?
No, we are not having any. We did not take any buildings. The only right of way we purchased were at the intersections.
Oh, okay.
Very small, just around the sidewalk, around the corner off. So 600 square foot, 500 square foot, things like that.
Okay, so that basically will stay the same through there then.
It'll have a sidewalk, curb and gutter, the street. So it may have impacted if they parked in front of it some because of the sidewalk being there. But that would be it. That would be the impact, would be parking on it, where they might have, sort of like Virginia Avenue Methodist Church, the parking they have on East Cedar won't be there anymore after the project. So that might impact it, but from it's all in the right of way. We tried to keep the project in the right of way for the most part. So.
One of the things that I would say be careful to watch out for, particularly if we're talking multifamily, this is effectively rezoning to a higher density rezone. So we want to make sure that we don't allow something that would not otherwise be appropriate for an area. If we get density is something that we need to look at and be careful with. That's all that I'm saying.
Do y'all feel comfortable with looking at some semblance of a multifamily reuse for these buildings possibility?
Well, I think
the idea
that
with Rosemont, because of all the surrounding land around it. I mean, there's a lot of room around that building in the back that could almost act like a buffer, playgrounds or more parking or even a storage building. No, but you got some buildings of this nature that are all crammed up with the houses all around them real close. But this piece of property, the only one side seems to have a lot of housing close to it, because it's kind of buffered around by the land around the back of it.
Yeah, I think the challenge, I guess, is the best word to say, is, we're talking about lots of one-off properties throughout the city in different neighborhoods and different zoning, and to say, what would you accept is kind of hard to do, because it's all one-off. I mean, do you want an old school that's next to you? Suddenly, you're in a single-family neighborhood, and suddenly you have 50 units there. I mean, that's a little, that's asking a little much of the neighborhood. I really, I mean, I don't have a good answer, but I think some of them are, and Kelly hit it on the head, is density or just intensity of use is probably the better term. You really got to balance that with the neighborhood that's in.
Sheriff, if you don't mind dancing carefully, because it's kind of potential type of rezoning discussion, you say the new owner has some thoughts about what they might want to do. Can you give us some general ideas?
Yes, and I feel like she would be happy to put forth not an application, no, but share some of her ideas with you all. But what we talked about, she's not interested in multifamily. She's more interested in a space for some like community events, potentially a wedding event. So more of a space for community or special events. That's what she's interested in. And there may be other items that she would look at on that property, but those are some of the things that we've talked about in the past.
Sort of a space where somebody could rent out and have an event.
Or maybe a meeting.
Or something.
Yeah.
I guess a conference, maybe, even if they wanted to. Meeting space, I guess, is the best way to put that.
Yeah. But I think I could talk with her more to get, we've talked very generally, but just in what I've shared with her with the special use permit items, those were not items that she had in mind. And again, she's never discussed multifamily, so that's not something that's on her radar as far as I know either.
As much as we want to work with people, and we really, really do, you've got to step back and say, okay, if this was a vacant piece of property, will we allow somebody to come in and build a whole brand new building doing whatever it is they want to do, be it multifamily or space planning or, whatever? Would that fit into the neighborhood if it was a vacant piece of property? Now, my question is that the proper way to look at it?
I think the challenge to me is if they're very limited currently by what we have on the books of what they can be used for. I mean, very limited. Once again, you saw the list. I can put it back up, but there you go. The special use, I mean, other than the residential 1 or 2 family dwellings, you got churches, daycares, hospitals. You can read down the list by special use. So I think it's a challenge, and if we want to preserve the building and not have it demolished at some point by somebody, be it us or somebody else, then I think we need to think about, are there things we could be comfortable with, types of uses other than those listed there? And that's the challenge, especially for the bigger ones. The smaller ones are, to me, easier, the other examples, than the bigger ones like this one. I mean, it's a lot of square footage. And unless it's a school or a church or, schools aren't even listed there. So if you look at that list, Unless it's a church or a daycare, it's very limited. We approved a sports club there. Y'all did a couple of years ago to have a sports club there. But it's very limited. I mean, you can see that chart. I mean, what you could do with them currently. And it is a challenge, I mean, because they are nice structures. And unless the city, steps in and like Slater Center and does a community center, I mean, it's very difficult to have something there on the private end because of how our rules are written currently. So I guess what we'd encourage all of y'all, and I don't want to dwell on it tonight, I tried to promise you I'd keep it short and sweet, but I don't want to dwell on it tonight, but just be thinking about what you would like, what you think you could tolerate in some of these reuse buildings. And churches, Mark had a good point that there's going to be vacant church buildings that churches are not going to go back into. I mean, and that, what reuse are we going to allow there? Because it's a similar type, big buildings, lots of square footage for the most part. And what do we allow to go back? Do we allow any repurposing of it that makes sense without coming short of tearing the structure down and just putting it back to the traditional what's in that zone use?
There's 2 churches, real close to the Rosemont School that have closed.
So if we're talking about doing this, what we do is suggest some different things that could be permitted, but if it's a special use permit, we might not permit it, right? I mean, if it's doesn't fit that neighbor, because each one is going to be unique.
And that's why we felt special use was the appropriate place, because once again, you're looking at that use and are there things that can be put in place in that neighborhood to make it that you're all comfortable with the compatibility to that neighborhood.
So we wouldn't
outright, it's okay to be there. It's yes, in general, we can support that use if these conditions are put on it. Like could be good.
We wouldn't want to leave something off just because we think it wouldn't work for Rosemont. I mean, we might want to leave it in, but maybe something doesn't work for every single one. Is that possible?
It would have to be zone specific, the uses. I mean, and you can always put I guess, and we have that somewhere, that if there's a use similar to these uses that we've listed, that it would be via special use permit request to Planning Commission. I think we've got that in some of our zoning regs on the by right use things in those regs in some of those zones. But you'd have to be specific to the zone, I think. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you could write a reg that everything, if you have an idea, once again, bring it to PC and let them weigh in on it.
Yeah. What about saying that you could, for these repurposing, not for the general district, but for repurposing, existing structures, large structures, however you can define that, that you could use the special use for one up of the district. So, I mean, what's the special use permits for an R3 district or something like that?
It's the same.
It's the same? Okay. I didn't know if it was expanded.
Our districts are the same.
Yeah, I was trying to look it up and couldn't find it.
Yeah, all the R districts. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, but if there was interest in expanding the special use permits, we wouldn't necessarily have to keep it that way. Like we could amend we could add the special uses for they apply only in RE and R2, or maybe this isn't suitable for R1A and you feel like it is suitable for R2, but we could adapt it as you thought would fit.
Each zone could have a different special use permit list.
Right.
And it could be general. I mean, multifamily, and maybe not put a density on it, and let you all set a density you felt comfortable with in the zone. I mean, in a specific instance, as part of the special use, we feel comfortable. I don't know. I'm just throwing things out. I mean, it's what we're trying to do here is brainstorm about how we all feel and ideas about reuse and adaptive reuse. Because as it's written, there's nothing going to happen for the most part with these bigger, especially the bigger buildings. Because just the cost of putting in some of those things, they don't take up the whole building, and to maintain the whole building for something small like a daycare, they had a daycare in there at one point, and it was just using a small portion of that building, and the maintenance cost of the whole building versus that daycare is immense.
Seems like in some cases zoning really ties our hands and restricts us a whole lot.
This is going to be a very difficult thing to pull off. The reason I say that, at least in my opinion, is the very exact same project in one building in one neighborhood would work. But, if you were doing something in Rosemont, maybe that would work. But if Haynesfield were vacant and you're trying to do it over there, that project may not work over there. Or if it was the church down the street or in another part of town. So it's going to be real hard to come up with a general, here's what we can do with readaptive use. Because it's going to be the neighborhood surrounding it as to whether or not planning commission is going to go along with the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if we put uses, it would have to the specificity shouldn't be there if we allowed, like say multifamily, and then PC could decide, well, we're not comfortable, we're comfortable with this much multifamily in this area versus say it was Haynesfield, you're on a major street right there, even though it might be zoned. But that's a good candidate to look at rezoning also. I mean, and that's somebody, I think Kelly or somebody talked about the fine line between this and rezoning a piece of property, to make it more useful, repurpose. Because Haynesfield, I mean, just say that one become vacant. Once again, you're on a major artery. You could entertain, and probably with our future land use plan, a rezoning for that building that would add some better use than Rosemont sitting in the middle of basically a single family neighborhood, be it small lot single family neighborhood, that makes that one more challenging.
Well, I think the person's going to get really challenged is Danielle on this, because she's got to keep us out of hot water of not picking and choosing winners and losers.
It's tough. And that's why I think you have to be general on, if you put a use there, it has to be general and not specific, because each one will have what makes it compatible with the neighborhood elements that you need to put on it if it's under special use. Danielle?
Well, I was going to agree. I think if we want to pursue this, it'd be a great idea to look at not just Johnson City and Knoxville, but as many other cities as we can find who've done something like this, to see how they've handled these. I'm sure everybody has encountered the same kinds of issues with these kinds of buildings. So we can gather as many ideas as we can and try to come up with something.
And we'll get y'all more information on the different, what everybody has. Like I said, we just want to start your brains churning on thinking about what to do with these buildings. And if you're comfortable, you may not be comfortable and say, leave them as it is. I mean, that's the other option, is leave it as it is. And like I said, I think the downside of that is somebody at some point is going to be tearing them down because they're not going to be used. They'll never be reused again. And that could be where we want to go. And then somebody could take the land and put it back into duplex development or single family development, depending on where they are. So anyway, food for thought. More to come. Let's put it that way.
All right. Is there anything else we need to do on this tonight at all?
No, that was just our discussion kickoff there for that.
Okay, training update. Does everybody have their hours in for this year?
Hey, Takai is leading the way with 1 hour.
Oh, man.
Now, y'all, since it's the first of the year, you all can go and watch the BZA that Danielle did a great job. And there's your 1 hour. You can watch it on YouTube, the BZA meeting from December. And that would give you an hour of training. And Sheriff can send you the link to that now so that you can pull that up. But that would be a good, Joel already, well, that was last year, Joel, so it doesn't count this year. Sorry about that.
Well, can I watch it again?
So, anyway, make sure you get your training. And then the bigger thing this month, you've got a few days left, but don't forget your statement of interest
Done it.
by the end of the month.
Good.
So hopefully everybody's got that done. City councils and planning commissions have to turn those in. So
If you don't mind, could you send an email out to everybody tomorrow so they've got it in writing to remind them?
certainly, we will.
Do you-
Sheriff, you get that? Yep. She's shaking.
Do you need a
all get
copy
some
or
kind-
confirmation on those, Tim?
Yeah.
No, we don't track that. The state tracks that.
Yeah,
Do we
yeah,
don't
they
get-
will.
Yeah, they'll come and get you.
Yeah.
Copy of those, Sheriff? Have we ever kept a copy of them? I don't, because you can submit them online, like to the state.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We haven't ever tracked them. You're on the honor system, and the state will come back and honor you one way or the other.
I have been approved, so I'm good.
Really do appreciate everybody putting in the training hours and getting them all taken care of last year. That was awesome.
Tim, will we have any in-house training sessions?
We can, if you've got some topics of interest, we can look and see if we can put something together. If you'll email Sheriff any topics of interest for training, then we can look and see if we can do that in-house and those opportunities to do that. So if you have any ideas for that, just email Sheriff.
Okay.
Well, what would be good is if these things that you're saying here, I want y'all to think about this and da-da-da-da. If there was training associated with this, that would be good. 2 birds, 1 stone.
Yeah, I would love to see some training on how to reuse old schools and old churches, something like that.
Sheriff could see
We can
if
find that.
we can put something together or get a speaker to do an
Yeah.
hour.
Or the smart cities or the Maryland, they do some great stuff. They may
I
have
think
archived.
they actually had one on there with that.
I think we can probably find definitely a pre-recorded at the national level kind of example, but then we could look to find some more local flavor as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it better when instead of us going watching a video, if we've got the opportunity to exchange ideas back and forth among us and the
Amen. I
speaker.
like that too. I'll go with that, Kelly.
We can watch a video together and then exchange ideas.
You got the popcorn?
We can each do our own popcorn. I think you're the one that's brought popcorn to the meeting before, right?
Yes, I have.
Smells good too, Kelly.
All right. Is there anything else we need to do tonight?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think that concludes everything from us.
All right. Then we're done.
Good night.
Have a good week.
Good night, everybody.